Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another special edition of Litter Media Live. I'm your host, Mike Smith. Our interview today with Chillicothe Mayor Luke Feeney is brought to you by Classic Brands. We'll get you caught up with some of the news that's going on in the mayor's office and for our city in general. All coming up after this from Classic Brands.
Are you looking for a beer that satisfies your thirst and love of country? Armed Forces Brewing Company brews beer for patriots. Celebrate freedom with every sip. Armed Forces Brewing Company. Freedom never tasted so good.
Back with Chillicothe Mayor Luke Feeney. Welcome back.
Good to be back. Thanks for having me.
Now that we've got all the elections out of the way, we don't have to worry about, having everybody's opponents in from every city that we cover. We can get back to talking business about the city of Chillicothe. The Chief of Staff position has been in the news of late. This is something you'd like to get added back in to your office. But as we were chatting just before we went on the air, this is a position that other mayors in Chillicothe have had in the past that I can recall.
That's right. It's a position that is built into our codified ordinances, which means it's a part of the structure of the city. And it's important, I think, when you compare to other cities, to know that every city kind of has its own structure. Some cities might have a city manager who reports to city council. They might not have a strong mayor format. We're in a situation here where we have a mayor who by code is part-time. That's me. And the key sort of pairing with that is the chief of staff, would be the day-to-day sort of operations person. 10 plus years ago, when the city was going through some budget crunch times, that position, I think, was lost due to attrition and has been kept off the books in an effort to save money. And we've done what we can to get by without it. And there were several other similar positions. The elected auditor, has what would be similar to her chief of staff, which is a deputy auditor. We've added that position back in. Another position or office where positions were cut was the law director's office, and we've hired back those assistant law directors. So for me, the chief of staff, it's a key administrative position. It coordinates departments, it interacts with the community, and really is essential for the operations of a city our size, one that's looking to the future.
Any other positions that may have been lost due to attrition or cuts, like with the police and fire, they've all been added back?
Yeah, so we had probably 15 years ago, there were firefighter layoffs. Those positions are all back. And in fact, if you went back 10 years or so before we passed the new safety levy, both the police and fire department have added about 7 positions since that time. And then there's been some other efficiency changes that, for example, it used to be the case that the fire department would do their own dispatching. Mm-hmm. We recognize that as an inefficiency. You don't pay a paramedic or a firefighter to do dispatching. So being able to move dispatching over to the centralize it at the police department meant that we got, in essence, 3 additional firefighters from that as well. And so this is really the only position that was cut during those hard times that hasn't been added back in. I proposed it as a part of our balanced budget proposal for 2024 operating. City Council asked to take a closer look at it separately. So Human Resources Committee Chairperson Kathy Payne has been leading that committee. That Human Resources Committee voted to put the ordinance or the funding in front of City Council, and that's where we are now.
Going to a different topic, drug rehabilitation and recovery has become a big thing in Chillicothe. In fact, a community of our size, it's amazing on how many recovery centers or houses that we have here locally, and that's a good thing. The concern, though, and I've had actual residents that have come to me and because they've heard us advocate for programs like that here on this program and elsewhere, but a concern as into a residential area. Is there a limit? Is there a certain number of recovery houses that are allowed? One gentleman said, I think I got 4 or 5 of these houses within a block of my house. So what's the code on that, so to speak?
So the city doesn't have any specific code language on recovery housing. We have zoning and code around how many unrelated people can live in a house. And so any code enforcement issues really would ignore today whether or not that the 4 people are, just 4 roommates or 4 people who are in recovery. City Council has not made any new rules or additional rules that relate to the enforcement of specifically recovery housing. And so questions like licensing and that sort of thing come up. So if it's recovery housing, and oftentimes how recovery housing works, to my understanding, is that there might be an aspect of Medicaid funding or something that's associated with it. That would be licensing that is related to whoever's running the facility and their relationship with the state as it relates to Medicaid. For us in the city, we don't have, and City Council has not passed any laws specifically around recovery housing. The existing code as it relates to who can live in a house is what governs it altogether. And I think, I'm not 100% on this, but I think that any housing, it's something along the lines of can't have more than 4 unrelated people living together or something like that, so that it couldn't be a 20-person unit or something like that.
Okay. The Tiffin Elementary or former Tiffin site, in fact, there's work being done down there today. There was a proposal that was announced, last calendar year about what they wanted to do with that area. Is that still the plan, and what's going on there now?
Great question. So the city acquired that property 3-4 years ago now. And my goal with that property is really to have it become an asset for housing in the community. The work that's going on right now is a grant that we got through the land bank to do remediation and site prep. The goal is to get that property as close to ready for a developer to come in and put in housing. Mm-hmm. We don't have a commitment to the type of housing or who the developer is. We've had ongoing conversations. This is the type of thing the chief of staff, can help facilitate. Ongoing conversations with developers and to try and attract housing. Whether that is, standalone housing, whether it's duplexes. If you look at the aerial view of Tiffin, it's really interesting because you can see how it would have been originally platted. And parallel there to, I guess, 5th and 7th, you would have had a 6th Street run right through the middle of it. So you can kind of see very easily how you could get something like 40 houses in there that are about the same size as what exists over there. But we're also open to duplexes, multifamily, anything that really supports pretty dramatic housing needs in the community. And so we got that grant, I want to say $150,000, because we know that everything that we can put into the property to entice developers is a good thing for housing in the community.
Of course, from the street level, you get one perspective. Dan Ramey, I think a year or two ago, had the litter drone over that site. That is a really big neighborhood, actually.
It really is.
If it became that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's the possibility of just laying it out in the grid that already exists, but there's also the possibility of, making it more like a little bit of a planned community with a park, and thinking about, how you see modern communities built now, modern neighborhoods. What are the aspects that people look for in those types of housing developments? And so we're really looking for somebody who is familiar with that type of building. Obviously, interest rates and supply chain we know is playing a part. But we also have the housing study from a few years ago that says there's high demand for good quality housing in the community. So we're pretty confident that we'll get something done over there.
Downtown street closing protocol. That was in the news here recently. In fact, I think there was a meeting of some of the downtown leaders of businesses. What's moving forward? What's going to be the protocol?
Sure. So let's do a little history here. We have a situation in downtown right now that is a very good one. Downtown is popular. You go down there right now, and it's 10 something on a Tuesday, and there's a lot of people parking, shopping, eating downtown. That wasn't necessarily the case 15, 20 years ago, and so we have had to think more carefully about how and when we close streets, because we want to be very conscious of the balance of trying to get people to downtown to see our stores and to spend their money and to have, want to come back. But we also want to balance that against events that might take away parking and make it restrictive for people who have brick and mortar shops. And so the closure protocol has been interesting because the DORA, the designated outdoor refreshment area, has added a layer. For quite a few years, you had a few signature events, First Thursdays, you had the feast, and really not that much else downtown. Now we have a situation where through the spring, you have a street sometimes requested to be closed almost every weekend. And so the protocol as of last year was to get City Council's authorization to do a closure. The new protocol is that the Safety Service Director has the sole authority, but the Safety Service Director cannot waive any fees. So if the applicant to close a street wants to come in and close the street but doesn't want to pay, they have to, and they're a nonprofit, they need to go to City Council for that waiver. And so what we've tried to do, the most recent example being the return of Gus Macker to downtown. With most big events, we encourage anybody who's even considering having an event to come to us first and discuss the possibility of the event. With Gus Macker, they picked the date and then they came in and told us that they wanted to close the streets. Unfortunately, they picked Mother's Day weekend, which for downtown shop owners is a very, very busy weekend. You can picture Mother's Day brunch, a lot of people coming downtown. And so we really have worked with the organizers of that event to try to accommodate both things, not take away too much parking, not block, parking in front of shops. And there's a balance there as well, because we know that people will come in to watch the event, but it's not necessarily a one-to-one correlation of spending money. And so if anybody is thinking about coming in and having an event, we highly encourage conversation beforehand. If alcohol is involved, there are still permitting processes necessary. And so the protocol right now is that the application comes in to the Safety Service Director, and the Safety Service Director will generally reach out to Downtown Chillicothe organization to try and gauge how much coordination has already happened, and other events going on, parking accommodations, to make sure the traffic flow still works and there's still parking available. So the only difference between this year and last year and recent years is there are more requests, and we're trying to coordinate better.
Staying on the topic of streets, because we're like a year or so later since 2nd Street went two-way, how has that worked out?
From my perspective, close to flawlessly. We put a lot of time and energy into making sure that it worked. I would say that the main concern I have now, and I think it's shared by people on the block of 2nd Street that is between the Majestic and Mulberry. In that block, we don't have meters. And so people, when you have meters, as a refresher, the goal of meters is that somebody parks, shops, and then moves on. We don't want somebody parking in front of a storefront for 8 hours a day, because then somebody can't get out and park. Well, on that section of 2nd Street where there's no meters, it's still 2-hour parking. And so enforcing parking in areas where we still need cars to turn over has been a bit of a challenge. But we have no data. We have an absence of any bad accidents. I mean, we took out a traffic light there, and it is safer for pedestrians. The goal was to make it a walkable and actually better looking area without the overhanging light there. And so I think it's been a success. And I think it's been an example of when you sort of challenge preconceived notions and work through a process with a goal in mind, and then after the fact kind of look back. It's hard sometimes to say, this doesn't feel right or this doesn't seem right, but let's work it through, because really the goal with the stop signs and removing the traffic lights in addition to the two-way, it was all about pedestrian safety and convenience, and we've seen both of those increase.
Yeah, that was the next question. With the stop signs, I think the original concern was, oh my gosh, they'll just blow right. From what I've experienced, I think the more the pedestrians are down there, the motorist becomes more conscious of that, so they think, okay, there is a stop sign.
That's absolutely correct. And, they're flashing stop signs right now. I don't know that will always be the case. But the simplest way I can explain it is sometimes traffic lights are counterintuitive to pedestrian safety. And the simplest way I can put that is traffic lights are about 15 feet in the air.
Right.
There are no humans 15 feet walking around in the air. Stop signs, however, are right at eye level, which is where pedestrians are. And so your eyes are naturally drawn to the stop sign. They're drawn to the area of where the pedestrians are. And the other thing about the two-way exchange is that when you have traffic coming at each other, it naturally slows it down, as opposed to two lanes, which is more of like a drag strip. This two-way traffic also causes a little bit more awareness and pedestrian-forward sort of environment.
Actually, I think that the flashing stop signs make sense. Now, for the locals, they got it. But for all of the visitors that are coming into our community for the first time, they're not used to that yet.
Right, they're not used to the flashing stop signs. One thing, the stop signs, the two-way did was made it much easier for people from out of town to navigate downtown. Because you have to remember, it used to be the case that Second Street wasn't the only one-way street. Right. It was set up in a pattern. Well, much of the pattern was removed. In fact, you couldn't even drive on a portion of Paint Street. It was a pedestrian mall. And when you remove pieces of the pattern and leave some of them, it makes the flow a little less intuitive. So now if you come into town and you're on Walnut and you're trying to figure out how to get to that first block between Walnut and the alley, now you can take a left and figure out how to get there. Previously, you'd have to go down to Main Street, take a left on Main Street, then you couldn't go left on Paint Street because it's no left during the day.
Yes.
So then you'd have to go all the way down to Mulberry, and now it's much simpler for somebody to get to, say, Sweet William Blossom or something right in that little block. And so, again, change isn't always easy, but I think that was a good example of how it worked out pretty well and how the conversation just kind of dies down after, we would see the social media post about how many people would get hurt and this will never work. And I think it has so far.
And I'm assuming that the angle parking is still the best option to maximize the number of parking spaces.
That's correct, yeah. Angle parking, I think you get 2 or 3 more cars per block, and that makes sense for us right now. We've seen suggestions on going back to parallel. We've seen some places have the back-end angle parking, which is a pretty dramatic change as well. But for right now, the angle parking is working well. 2
more questions. This is the last one on the streets. Columbia Gas line repairs continue. People wondering about the paving, you don't do that until all that's done, right?
Yeah, they are doing such a big project, and we're doing our best to coordinate with them. Main Street, for example, is all torn up. Still from last year. But this year is a very significant paving year. In coordination with ODOT, we are doing paving all the way from Eastern Avenue. This will be Route 50, Eastern Avenue to Bridge Street to Main Street, all the way out Western Avenue, which will repair a lot of that gas line work. We're working internally to make sure that we call it a street opening. Yeah. If you have to cut into a street, make sure that our street opening rules are resulting in the repairs being adequate. But yeah, we're definitely, I know that there was a street, I think it was either Mulberry or Hickory last year that we had scheduled to pave, right, but we did not because we did not want to pave it and then have cut right into by Columbia Gas. So we're doing our best to coordinate with them and make sure that people are the impact on the community is as limited as possible.
Lastly, obviously, our community is a history haven. The Fox Farm building was just taken down. A lot of clamor, comments about that history being lost, but it still comes back, even with the Carlisle building, as long as it was around in a burned out stage. Somebody finally had to come along and put up the money to fix it up. Mm-hmm. And I guess that's the answer everywhere. If you want to save history, somebody's got to pony up the bucks.
Yeah, I think it's a tough situation because there was a lot of affection for that building. I know it wasn't on the historic register, but it was old, and really the last of its kind on that street. Obviously, downtown has another layer of laws and protections, but the reality is that you're right. The protection or trying to preserve a building or stop it from being torn down after it's purchased, as long as everybody involved is doing everything within the law, there's really, it's tough to stop that. And so it's a lot of work on the front end, whether it's the acquisition by somebody who wants to protect it or legislation to preserve something like that. Smith School would be another example. And in many ways, it's similar to solar farms. You know, people, it is one of the founding notions of our country, property rights and people being able to do with what they want on their property. And we have zoning and certain things in the city. But it's tough to tell somebody, and in terms of thinking about community development, that the government might step in after the fact and interfere, other than conversations, that sort of thing. And so I am appreciative of the people who have spent so much time and energy in this community to preserve, because I think particularly downtown, we have a community that the historic preservationists have made a significant difference, and it's one of the reasons people come here. But I'm also appreciative of people who are wanting to invest in this community. So one of the tough things about this job is just the balancing of interests, I suppose.
This has been too much like work. I've been bang. Can I come back every other week so I don't have to answer so many questions? Yeah. But it's good getting caught up with you, Mayor.
For sure.
Again, Chillicothe Mayor Luke Feeney, our special edition guest on Leonard Media Live, brought to you by Classic Brands. I'm Mike Smith.